Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen. Is Pantheon the so-called spiritual successor to EverQuest? That's a question I've been asking for at least a few years now. For many PC gamers, EverQuest defined the MMO-RPG genre. However, the classic EQ experience was never quite matched by later successors. I didn't play all the MMOs in the intervening years, but I played many of them, and many were great in their own unique ways. But none scratched the itch like original EQ. All the others lacked something special. They were all missing some quality that was hard to describe. During the COVID shutdowns, I revisited EQ and spent a glorious year adventuring and raiding with an amazing guild. After a 20-year hiatus, I finally got to see all the end-game content I missed the first time around. It was easily some of the most fun I ever had gaming. And beyond the fun and games were the friendships I made with the other guildies. We genuinely cared for each other. I cried when the guild leader announced the guild was disbanding. But it was an inevitable announcement I had been waiting for and dreading. It was time to get back to real life, so it all worked out for the best. And some years passed, and my life progressed. I watched online chatter about Pantheon and was inspired by the early streams. It looked like the developers had the right idea. But then, some stuff happened. I'm not exactly clear about what happened. I'm not an expert on the history. It was announced that the game was moving to a different game engine, and that pre-made graphics would be used for the time being. The news was upsetting. Worse, the screenshots and video captures of the new version looked terrible. I also remember a time when there was talk about changing the gameplay into some sort of PvP arena. The whole thing became confusing and upsetting. I basically wrote off Pantheon, assuming it would never become the dream we hoped for. Fast forward a year later. A video pops up in my YouTube feed of a streamer clumsily trying a new character in Pantheon. At first, I was skeptical and cynical. Then I saw the character selection screen. The graphics looked super low res. The textures on the castle in the background came straight from 1998, and the water looked like old school MMO water. Then the YouTuber started the game, and I suppose I didn't know how to feel. It did not look as bad as I had expected. And apparently, the game was open, that moment, open to anyone willing to pay $40 for early access. I decided I was going to buy it and check it out. That was about a month ago. I first tried a Dire Lord and played him until level 7, but I just wasn't feeling that class. I liked playing bards, but they're not in the game yet. They will be eventually. I decided to play a wizard. I like big firepower, and I'm not the biggest fan of face-to-face combat, so a wizard made sense. 3 weeks later, I'm level 17. I have a good collection of spells and abilities, a decent set of newbie gear, and about 20 gold pieces to my name. As to the question, is Pantheon really the spiritual successor to EverQuest? I can answer that by explaining what made EQ so special. The best part about EverQuest was interacting with all the other players. The sense of community, of shared experience and culture. It was fun to be in the middle of town, to see all the other characters running around, busy with 1,000 tasks. As noobs, we look with envy at the power players, with their fierce-looking weapons and glowing armor. It was fun to text chat with others, in groups, with folks in your guild, and in out-of-character public chat. So, the social elements were a huge part of EQ's appeal. What about EQ's setting, the world of Norrath and all its zones and life forms? It was all perfect, borrowing heavily from classic Dungeons & Dragons. All the classic races, classes, and monsters from D&D were in EQ too. EQ's zones were masterfully laid out, which meant some zones were spread out and spacious, others deep underground and claustrophobic. The zone layouts in EQ felt realistically chaotic. There were dead ends, uneven ground and sudden elevation changes, and water features where you didn't expect. There were zones that are narrow valleys, zones taken up entirely by water, and of course, zones in other planes of existence, where the normal rules of physics don't always apply. The zone layouts in EverQuest were meaningful and memorable. And, of course, a compelling lore and mythology were created, putting the world into context by describing a cosmic struggle between the gods. And how about EQ's music? EverQuest had an inspiring opening fanfare and all sorts of perfectly themed clips that would play in various locations. Just hearing those tunes today brings a flood of memories and emotions. With all those things combined, the social sense of community and interaction, Norrath's classic high fantasy setting, the widely varied zones and terrain, and its inspiring music, EverQuest became an unforgettable gaming experience for tens of thousands of players. Okay, well, where does that leave Pantheon? Does Pantheon have a chance of achieving a similar experience? In this player's mind, the answer is a resounding yes. Yes, yes, yes. By now, I am convinced. The lineage is sound, the vision is pure, and the product, even in this early unfinished stage, is astounding. Indeed, Pantheon Rise of the Fallen does feel like the spiritual successor to EverQuest. Finally, it's all here. The first criterion I mentioned was the social aspect and the sense of community. That sense of community is happening in Pantheon right now 100%. On any given day during the busy hours, the towns will be filled with adventurers, returning or preparing to hunt, buying and selling gear, working on trade skills, or just chatting and socializing. Players are always asking and answering questions, and generally, the atmosphere is friendly and helpful. And I get the same sense of envy when I see higher level players equipped with new armor or weapons. There is no voice chat built into the game yet, so all communication has to be typed, just like EQ. What about the races, classes, and monsters of Terminus? I was relieved to see that most of everything looks familiar. We have the classic races, humans, elves, ogres, and more that are coming. We have the traditional classes, warriors, paladins, clerics, enchanters, wizards, rogues, to name a few, and they all behave close to how you'd expect. And all the classic mobs are there too. Goblins, orcs, and undead are in here, along with mundane forest creatures, and much tougher stuff too. The physical setting of Terminus is awe-inspiring. That's the world's name in Pantheon, Terminus. The zones are huge. They are massive compared to EQ zones. And to my great relief, the zones feel organic and natural. I'm seeing the same kind of random yet believable geography that I saw in EQ. Great use of elevation, water, flora, and space. The vistas and views in Terminus are tremendous. Almost every play session while medding between fights, I notice how breathtaking some of the views are. Now, what you are about to see in a moment is just another piece of evidence of how perfect Terminus feels. Here's my character resting between fights, taking in the scenery, and then we notice something odd. Up there, on the top of that cliff wall, it's something looking at me. This was not planned. I honestly just noticed some creature up there poking its head over the side. I can faintly see 2 red eyes. Exactly. This is the feeling, the vibe, the sense of wonder. What the frick is up there, watching me? Is it friendly? Is it a foe? Is it an NPC I'm supposed to talk to? Or a mob I'm supposed to fight? I heard rumors that drakes exist in Terminus. I suspect it might be a drake, and I want to climb up and check it out. Oh yeah, did I mention the climbing mechanic actually works really well and adds a cool dimension to exploring? So I'm speeding up the video here a little as I make a few unsuccessful and painful attempts to scale the wall. but I suspect this isn't the right spot to climb up. I will find the right path, but not right now. I need to finish my work with the asps and get going. I'm a casual gamer and a family man, so I have real-life commitments to attend to. And that's okay, because in Pantheon, I can log on and do a little soloing like this as time allows. And when I have more time, I'll jump into a fun group and grind XP and loot for a few hours. Moving on to the music. The music in Pantheon is 100% pitch perfect. I am also a musician, so I recognized the musical score right away. And from the first time I logged in, I was blown away. The music in Pantheon captures the perfect blend of enthusiasm mixed with melancholy, of adventure mixed with danger. The music embodies the spirit of fantasy and inspiration. I am constantly stunned by the music. It is perfect. I don't need to say more about it, honestly, because there's nothing about it to fault. So that leaves the lore. It's true that at this early stage, most of the lore and mythology are missing, and I'm not worried about that at all. In my opinion, dropping in the lore should be the easy part. They just need to hire a few old school dungeon masters to whip up some gods and goddesses and write a creation myth. No big deal, honestly. I guess I can say that because I qualify as an old school dungeon master, so I know what's involved. I think the hard part is done. The game mechanics work. The cadence and pace of battle is comfortable. The world feels dangerous and believable. The social scene is popping. The lore will come in due time. This means all the ingredients are there. The social elements, the inspired zones and believable geography, the classic races, classes, and mobs, together with the perfect music. All these elements combined paint a very clear picture. It means there is nothing ahead of us except the promise of adventure. In conclusion, is Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen, indeed the spiritual successor to EverQuest? In this player's mind, the answer is heck yes. I know this is the correct answer because as I type these lines, I actually want to take a break, log in, and solo more of those asps. Be safe, fellow adventurers. I hope to see you in Terminus soon.